Hey Jeff, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me again.
Good to have you. We are talking about the new trend today towards forever renters. A lot of Americans who traditionally were homeowners are becoming long-term renters, including some who simply don't even plan to ever buy a house. That this trend's, sparking new types of developments, and especially kind of at the high end, where we're seeing like concierge service. We're seeing high-end luxury apartments, with pools, with gyms. We're seeing some folks who simply couldn't, and they could afford a house, but they couldn't afford a house with a concierge and a pool and a gym and all the rest. And we're seeing some folks that are, it's not just about the higher mortgage rates, so that plays into it and high housing prices, but we're also seeing a class of renters that like all the amenities that they couldn't otherwise afford. And in the past, these folks bought a house. Now they're paying rent, and getting all those amenities, and they seem quite happy just with that lifestyle and staying there. Your thoughts on kind of this new trend we're seeing in residential housing?
I think it's probably relevant in larger cities. You get into the suburbs, it's not as I guess it's not really looked on as the same, where somebody really wants a house, wants a yard, wants the two and a half kids and the dog and a fence. It may not work as well. But when you're living in urban areas, it makes sense. You get the extended living area. I think it probably also gets torn down a little bit when you start looking at the size of the units. And truthfully, the other side is, I think the positive side is that for some of these people, maybe as they're aging, or maybe as they're not, they just don't know how to do it, but they don't want to take care of roofs. They don't want to take care of lawns. They don't want to garden. They don't want to grow their food. They want to be able to buy it and do what they want to do and move on with their lives.
I think that's a good point because I think we're almost kind of seeing two categories within here. There is a category of folks that, maybe they are in the suburbs, and I think, that category is more of necessity. The higher
Yeah.
mortgage rates, the higher prices have kind of given, buying houses isn't so much of an option for them right now. Um, and then I think there's this other class, and you rightly point out that's going to be more in urban areas, that they like the lifestyle. Um, and they could have the option of maybe moving out to the suburbs and getting a house, but they want to be like in a downtown, where they get all those amenities and they get all that um, lifestyle perks. So I do think there's kind of two categories here, and it seems like that's two very different developments. Whether you're doing a suburban one for folks who are renting, they'd probably rather own their own house, but they can't afford it, and they kind of want that homeowner experience, that kind of white picket fence experience. And then the other category of those high urban core dwellers that want the kind of high lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think look, it's one of those things that remains to be seen, but until somebody creates something where it's relatively easy to rent in one place and go to another place, almost like a timeshare type um, idea or technology, you probably will see this in urban areas and where people can literally live. They can cook if they want to. They can walk downstairs and go to the restaurant if they want to. They've got open areas for, or not even necessarily open, just smaller areas for communal type, or social type eating and social atmosphere. It probably makes sense. But to your point, and probably my point as well, back to it is, in the suburban areas, most people are looking for a house. They're looking for a place to play outside and do stuff more outside, not just inside an apartment.
Yeah, and I also think that you do have an increasing trend of people not having children, a larger share of the population. And for those with
Sure.
income, I think you're going to get a share of those that kind of like this lifestyle. And they have the income to support it and not worry about it. And they're not really worried about necessarily like leaving a house to their offspring or whatever. So, I think, this is a trend probably has some room to run, especially on kind of the high end, kind of those mixed use, high end developments that we're seeing more of in those kind of, nice kind of urban areas.
Right. I mean, and again, let's not forget there is a large percentage of owning a house that goes towards maintenance. handling air conditioners, handling roofs, handling the yards, everything that some people can't just and don't have the tools to do themselves, and can't afford. They can barely afford the mortgage, much less afford to pay someone to do the stuff that they want to do to make it, their house.
Yeah, and and as we see some people just not never getting married, and happy being single, or maybe they're unhappy being single, but they are single. Either way, that that's more workload for one person than it is for a couple. So I think that's another appeal is when you're renting, especially like a high end apartment, all this stuff gets taken care of. You don't have to deal with it.
Well,
You
I
can
mean,
just
you
deal
kind of
with your
hit something
career.
interesting there as well as the two household income, either whether or not you're married or not, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, whatever. You're really covering the bills with two incomes, not generally one. So, if you are getting people who aren't having kids or aren't getting married, they've got to be more conscientious of what their bills are, regardless if it's only one person who's covering the bills.
Yeah, and
Or
I'm
sorry,
just
if
yeah.
they're single and one person covering the bills. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
and
need to
I'll
clarify.
I'll betray one of my Gen X biases. I do think maybe millennials, you're starting to see generations that have been kind of coddled a little bit more, and they're going to be a little bit more enjoying this kind of lifestyle where they're taken care of more. They don't have to do as much stuff. Again, my own personal bias, but I think colleges have become a lot more. Taking care of people, and the housing's definitely more high end than when I was there. I think there have been. I'm just going to say millennials are way more spoiled than my generation was. I think they're more used to and enjoying getting taken care of. So I think this trend's going to keep running. And I think there's a core of people, especially who've got nice incomes and want to have a nicer lifestyle that they can afford to rent, but couldn't necessarily afford to buy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it a lot, Jeff.
Thanks, Steve.